Welcome in to the Paul Kuharsky podcast. I'm him, and paulkuharsky.com is my website. I'm part of the 440 Sports Network, brought to you by Zen Sports, the best place to bet on the internet. Happy to see you talk about the Titans' 53-man roster, the delay with the starting cornerbacks, and some interesting rehash about John Robinson's effect and non-effect on this roster, which has come up in multiple questions from you guys on the voicemail hotline, but gives us something to really dig into. Happy to see you guys coming in. Spread the word with the retweet, etc. Hope everybody's doing well heading into the last weekend without football for a long time. Good to see Kim and Dwayne and others. Another example of kind of things we find out from Brian Callahan that we don't find out from Mike Vrabel. Tyler Boyd is the Titans' emergency third quarterback. We'll never see him, but if the crazy scenario where both Will Levis and Mason Rudolph got hurt, Tyler Boyd would be the guy who takes a couple of snaps for the Titans at quarterback. Good to see you too, Andrew Frill, Ivan Gregory. Let's hop in to some of this. First, the final 53. Obviously, the biggest thing here is the 5 tight ends for the Titans, which is a surprise. But the more you think about it, the less of a big deal it is, given the special teams meaning of it. So, you could keep Hassan Haskins there, who's gone to the Chargers now. You could keep Hassan Haskins as a 4th running back. Now, presuming he's up to play special teams, what's the difference between he or Thomas Odukoya or Martin Robinson being up and active? Nothing really. The thing is, if a running back gets hurt, you need to go get a running back to have enough on your roster to be healthy and secure. And that's not the case at tight end, where you're now overloaded. Same thing at inside linebacker, where they may have as many as 7 now. But you're going to have 6 or 7, and you've got a load of guys who are going to play special teams. A couple are going to be inactive. So the roster shape is a little bit weird. They still need some help at corner in particular. But it's the way things are going to generally look. There isn't going to be a huge changeover at what they do after they claimed Ali Gay, who's an outside linebacker / defensive end, tall at 6'6", but light. Julius Woods, who's a Mike Brown type and a special teamer who came in from Dallas. And this is going to be generally the core of people they have. They're not dying to get their hands on a backup quarterback. He would be more of a developmental guy. Mason Rudolph's going to handle scout team, which is generally the way it goes. Ivan asks if Mason Rudolph is the strongest backup since Tannehill or Volek. I mean, Volek had some great appearances. Neil O'Donnell was the best backup this team ever had. They cut Nick Vanette, and now he's back. It was a procedural thing that they needed to do. Somebody's asking there, Dwayne. So, look, the biggest single question really heading into the opener, outside of, what's the scheme look like and all of that, but out of training camp, we haven't seen the corners. Chidobe Awuzie practiced some yesterday and today, and he will be full next week. L'Jarius Sneed was back yesterday, full yesterday and today, and will be full next week. These 2 guys have not practiced together and have not practiced with the defense hardly at all. Awuzie got hurt on the first day of camp. Sneed practiced 2-3 times in this knee management plan that they had for him, which has been a big deal. Everybody's downplaying it. I wish they'd come out and say, hey, yeah, the fact that we haven't played together is less than ideal. And, there's some risk of lack of communication and all of that stuff coming back to bite us. But here is Cheeto on the idea of he and Legarius not having played for a long time through camp, being a problem for them as they head to Chicago a week from Sunday.
No concern from us. Any concern will only be probably from the outside. Worry doesn't add a day to your life. You know what I'm saying? So all you can do is take everything day by day. And that's what me and him have done this whole process.
Worries add a day to your life. I don't think they need to be worried. But look, we'll find out when Caleb Williams is thrown to DJ Moore and his band of brothers. I think the hype for Chicago is a little strong. I like the Titans' chances to be competitive in this game, obviously. But I think there's a lot to be said for all this missed time between these two guys. And we're going to find out if the Titans' strategy here, Awuzie, is, wasn't part of the plan. L'Jarius Sneed was the plan right from the start. And so we're going to find out if, that's something that is kind of acceptable in the flow. They did it last year in Kansas City. He didn't practice at all in the in training camp, and they obviously got great returns. And the Titans are counting on the same sort of thing going on for them moving forward here, and we'll see. So that's a big one to watch. Let's get into the John Robinson stuff here, which is keyed around a couple of questions that are on the voicemail line. If you're a member of paulkuharsky.com, you've got access to the voicemail line. You would have, if you get the text that tells you that this broadcast is coming, you would have heard it. And that would have, so you've got that voicemail to use anytime you are so moved. Let's start with Trey on JRob.
What up, Paul? Just wanted to give you a call. This is Trey in Chattanooga. Love the podcast. Love everything. I love hearing the podcast with the hotline calls. Great for the community. Love everybody embracing it. But I wanted to ask you, I think this has been on the timeline for me on Twitter. I think all these guys getting traded or cut or moved away, it's just the ghost of John Robinson's past. And now it's a nice change. I know JRob, he needs his credit for the first few years, but the bottom fell out so freaking bad. These draft picks, and I know Radens is getting the right guard spot, which is what we all hope for with Bill Callahan coming through. But I'm glad to see Rand recouping some late round picks. Do you see him continuing to make moves like he did with the linebacker, Ernest, I think Jones it was? Because, obviously there's needs at other positions as well, or do you see him, looking through some of the old wily vets that are still sitting waiting to go through a training camp and get signed before the season? Love the site, love the community. Appreciate it, Paul.
Thanks, Trey. Farley was the big one who's let go here, and anybody that follows this team closely knew that Caleb Farley didn't have a chance of making this team. We knew that Caleb Farley's Titans career really ended when he got hurt last year playing special teams, and he wasn't even good enough to play defense there. Then they brought in all these corners. He wasn't comparable to Brownlee. He wasn't comparable to Gabe Judy-Lawley, who didn't even make the team. So, there's another first rounder out the door after just a couple of years who didn't do anything. And was just a bad first round pick. So with regard to other picks going out the door, there's nobody giant of note. I'm going to get to this more on the next question. Asked Rand Carthon about cap space. I think they've got 24 or 28. Rand said, we'll spend if we need, but, we're not going to do anything just to spend the money. I think the big moves are done. They got to have contingency money here if they've got a big injury and they feel compelled that they've got to make a move or go out and get somebody. But look, this roster revamp has been pretty damn thorough. They've got some old guys and they've got some injured guys, but they had a lot of work to do. They've got like 16 new guys conceivably in their top 24, which is massive. They've got a hole at edge, that Arden key spot we don't generally like. It's not a 3-down edge. And right guard and right tackle are probably weak links, though I'm not convinced that Dylan Radins and Nicholas Petit-Frere can't be good contributors on a Bill Callahan offensive line. And they're not going to be fixed or great everywhere in 1 year after firing the head coach and bringing in a new head coach. So Ernest Jones was a nice move, came very cheap. Guy's still on his first contract. They didn't give up very much to get him. His highlight reel is amazing. The Rams were really, really down on him. So, he said all the right things, but he's got to be much more upbeat about playing. He's accepting that he's not going to get a contract extension before he shows the Titans what he's got. But let's keep on this JRob theme here with TJ.
Hey, TJ King here. Member for a couple of years, first time reaching out. Appreciate the content. Been a great time being a member. My question is really kind of around philosophy of GMs and drafts. So, looking at the cuts the last couple of days, we can look back in retrospect and see John Robinson really, screwed up. Obviously, a couple of drafts with only Dylan Radins really being on the roster here from a couple of in a row. What goes into that? And obviously, I know JRob was the one at fault. Everything falls on him. But how much goes to player development? How much goes to scouting? We've heard JRob was stubborn and maybe didn't take in other opinions. But it seems to be all over the place. Caleb Farley was a consensus first-round pick. Maybe didn't look into the injuries. Traylon Burks looked like a bust, but maybe he's getting ready to blossom under a new staff. So it seems to be all over the place, the indictments on it. Is there certain philosophies that you've seen work, others that don't? You've been around, previous to John Robinson, Mike Reinfeld, all the way back to Floyd Reese. So just curious to your insights on things that may work or may not work in terms of GM philosophies and maybe some insights to why JRob was so poor towards the end. So appreciate your time. Look forward to hearing back. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Well, there's a lot to chew on there from TJ, and we're going to get deep into this. First off, there's a lot more than Dylan Radins left behind by Robinson, who's been out for 2 drafts now. Titans are counting on still not enough John Robinson guys, but many John Robinson guys. Dylan Radins, Nicholas Petit-Frere, Chig Okonkwo, Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, Amani Hooker, Roger McCreary, Nick Westbrook, Akine. Those are all John Robinson guys. It should be more, absolutely, on the depth chart that's left from John Robinson. And there were too many busts. Isaiah Wilson, one of the biggest busts of all time. Caleb Farley, certainly a giant first-round bust as well. John Robinson, you have to ask player development. Let's get into the player development idea. There was not enough player development by Vrabel with the people he brought in. But Kyle Phillips' hamstring, which was a problem under Vrabel and which was a problem under Callahan, that's not a player development issue. That's Kyle Phillips' hamstrings issue. And I don't know that Kyle Phillips had hamstring issues in college. I think that's a guy that comes in and doesn't have the body to withstand the demands of NFL practices and camps and games. Des Fitzpatrick, who's drafted in the 4th round with a trade up. That is terrible judgment. He's not an NFL quality player. Late picks, they did not hit on enough. Right now, and it's too early to give a gold star, but Jalen Harrell looks promising. and James Williams looks promising. Did Sebastian Tretola ever look that promising as a 7th-round pick? Let's look at the late picks that quote unquote hit for John Robinson. Tajay Sharp was a semi-productive wide receiver in a wide receiver drought period, which is virtually all of Titans history. He was a pretty good player for a 5th-round pick. LaShawn Sims made some contributions as a depth cornerback. Jayon Brown was a very good player. Corey Levin was a 6th-rounder. He's still hanging around. He's on the practice squad. Dane Cruikshank peaked as at his very best, had some effective games covering tight ends out of the slot. Amani Hooker, a 4th-rounder, very good player. Rashad Weaver had been on the team for a couple years, just got cut. They're trying to bring him back to the practice squad. Really had fallen off the table, though, not good. Chigakonkwo as a 4th-rounder, looked pretty solid, but he's now, he didn't discourage them from keeping 5 tight ends by any means, 4 other guys. Phillips, 5th-rounder, can't get on the field. Chance Campbell, who everybody fell in love with during this training camp, another guy who can't stay healthy, was a 6th-rounder. That's not enough late picks who hit under John Robinson. Those are not enough, and those are not good enough as your hits. But we're talking about player development here. Let's look at the 3rd round. Kevin Byard, unbelievable 3rd-round pick, right? All-pro a couple times. Jonnu Smith developed here and played well here. Went to New England and did nothing. Went to Atlanta last year, did very little. Taywan Taylor, not developable, a bad player. Nate Davis was a good player, good value for a 3rd-round pick, a regular starter here in the lineup, still in Chicago, I believe. We'll see him opening day. Darrington Evans. He's on the IR, designated to return in Buffalo. After he left here, he went to Chicago, Miami, now Buffalo. Has done nothing in the league. Is that on the coaching staff that they didn't develop him, or is he not very good? He's not very good. Monty Rice, cut here. Just got cut in New Orleans. He signed to Atlanta. Expect anything of Monty Rice? I don't. Malik Willis, not good. It's a bad pick. You trade up to draft Malik Willis, and you wasted a 3rd and a 5th to draft Malik Willis to turn it into a 7th-round pick, and he couldn't stay on your roster after 2 seasons, and now he's one of the, if you did a list of backup quarterbacks in the league, Green Bay was the worst team in the league at backup, and now remains one of the worst teams in the league at backup. At backup quarterback. That's a list of bad 3rd-round picks from John Robinson, more than it's a list of players who were not developed by the Titans coaching staff. On those late picks, did John Robinson let the scouting staff contribute enough to those? I don't think so. We don't know for sure. I think that the scouts were a bunch of yes men for John Robinson. Now they're being allowed to contribute more. Rand Carthon comes from a place where those scouts were encouraged to stand on the table for guys and given power with late round draft picks. That's not the way it worked here for under John Robinson. And coach picks. Mike Vrabel had some power, and his staff. He had some power to sway the Titans to make certain selections at certain times. Is he a great talent assessor? It did not seem that he was a great talent assessor either. So, that's where you're left with that. I think there's a lot that went wrong with John Robinson. His ego got in the way after he hit. He hits with Jeffrey Simmons and thinks he can take injured guys and have success with them and things like that. You hear Corey Davis even early was a surprise to people in the draft room rather than a collaborative result of what went on with there. Eric asks what happens with Molden. He's concerned about cornerback depth. They said that Molden wasn't a cornerback in their eyes, so he was a safety. So he got passed by all of the safeties that they had, and they preferred Julius Woods. So to them, Julius Woods, the waiver claim, Mike Brown were ahead of Molden, who doesn't run great. Great guy, but not good enough for them, and fell out of favor. There's also a report out there that he wasn't happy. It's no surprise he wasn't happy. They brought in guys, starting with Jamal Adams, who ranked ahead of him, and so he pretty much lost his spot. So Trey says Jonnu had terrible quarterback sense. Lots of good receiving players catch balls from bad cornerbacks. So we'll see what he does from here. But the fact of the matter is, the way his record looks now, he did far better with the Titans than with anybody else. And this includes Arthur Smith, who certainly developed him and knew how to use him. So this current staff says tall Texan turned Willis into a tradable player in one off season. That tells you a lot about this staff versus last staff. Now, let's not go crazy over a seventh round pick. I mean, it certainly is better than nothing. But the difference between a 7th round pick and an 8th round pick, which doesn't exist, is not very much. Green Bay was willing to give up a 7th round pick, which is not worth very much, in order to fend off anybody that might have wanted to take, put in a waiver claim for Malik Willis. I think Willis, we can all agree, got better. If you don't agree that he didn't still get good, that he's still a long way from good, I don't think you're watching the same guy that I did. Others are putting in other guys here as busts. Corey Davis does not qualify as a bust the same way that Isaiah Wilson or Caleb Farley qualify as busts. Corey Davis nearly had a 1,000-yard season. He wasn't good. He wasn't worthy of being the 5th pick in the draft. Dylan Radins isn't good. Now he's like a comeback story for having endured everything, but he's going to be a starting guard in the NFL. You're getting something of value for him. He's not as good as Corey Davis, by the way. But those guys are not in the same basket as Isaiah Wilson and Caleb Farley. Isaiah Wilson's in a basket all his own. He played 4 snaps in the league for the 28th pick or 26th pick in the draft. That's ridiculously bad. And for Caleb Farley, that's ridiculously bad. Corey Davis doesn't go in the same basket as that. That's nowhere close. Nowhere close to the same. And Ivan's pointing out JRob's record. Nobody's disputing that JRob started well and supplied a good backbone. When you draft Derrick Henry and Kevin Byard, when you trade for Ryan Tannehill, when you draft Jeffrey Simmons, I mean, he did very good things. And those things last for a while and keep you good for a while. But you're not going to count in his overall record, the 66-48 that you're citing, a lot of losses that are now over the last 2 years and maybe into this year that count because of the bad roster that he left in place. I have people who ask me, how long can you blame John Robinson for the Titans' troubles? And the fact of the matter is, some of the Titans' troubles remain John Robinson's fault, at least through 2024. Maybe into 2025, when Treylon Burks still should be under contract. You should be exercising a first-round pick, fifth-year option, and that would mean Burks would be a primo factor for this team into 2025. But his 2022 draft class should be influential through the end of their rookie contracts into 2024. And that class is not going to be influential that way. It's not. And that's a big problem. So you can't say, well, John Robinson's gone You can't say his fingerprints are on this team in a negative way for as long as you're gonna count it. I mean, sure, the new GM comes in, ran with working with Chad Brinker, and is of influence at replacing these guys. That's absolutely true. And they've done a lot of good work to replace these guys. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 players from 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22, 5 years of where guys should still be under contract, 4 years plus an option year. 5 years, 8 players from John Robinson, Landry, Simmons, Hooker, Radens, nobody from 20, Okonkwo, Petit Frere, McCreary, and Traylon Burks. And Traylon Burks is a huge disappointment. Traylon Burks is the reason they had to sign DeAndre Hopkins. Traylon Burks is the reason that they had to spend the money they did on Calvin Ridley. I mean, there's trickle-down effect in a million ways. They wouldn't have had to spend the Dylan Radens pick on a right tackle. Better yet, the other things they'd done on the offensive line if they hadn't busted on Isaiah Wilson. So the trickle-down effect is enormous. And I am not as anti-John Robinson as a lot of people are. I think John Robinson should have been given another year to try to dig out of what he did and all of that. But also for him to blame COVID. I mean, the Colts had a pretty good draft the year of COVID. It didn't seem to interrupt Chris Ballard doing that. So I think it's a little bit a little bit much to act like John Robinson's record was good and not add to that, but the Titans lost games after John Robinson left because of problems that John Robinson created. So I think that's a mistake. This is just false here from Matt Bailey. He said Vrabel's just a rah-rah, go street fight type of guy. I mean, Mike Vrabel didn't win enough games in the long run. Mike Vrabel had bad talent. He suffered at the hands of John Robinson in a lot of the worst stretches. But Mike Vrabel also won some games that he had absolutely no business winning, like that game early against Houston where he started, I believe, Blaine Gabbert and was down several offensive linemen, and gave the ball to Henry and Wildcat and all kinds of stuff. So he was not as bad as he's made out to be by some people. And Richard says, did JRob's poor drafting get Vrabel fired? Well, JRob's poor drafting helped get JRob's poor drafting helped get Mike Vrabel fired. Mike Vrabel's ego and the way he handled Carthon and this new wave, like super collaboration attitude that Amy hopped on board certainly got him fired. Ryan Parker asks if Stonehouse is shaking off all the jitters with the punts against the Saints. I don't see why not. I mean, there wasn't pressure on him in those. So until he faces pressure, you don't know. But what else can you do except give him those couple punts? Sam thinks Vrabel was overrated and he dug his own grave. He certainly did dig his own grave. And I don't know that it was the final star, but Matt Bailey points out the final straw was the black punt that cracked the star punter in half. Craig Aukerman fired the next day. Certainly Amy's doing, and a big bearing on that from a guy that just consistently his unit underperformed, and we were told by Vrabel that we didn't understand what exactly was going on there. And Craig Aukerman's now an assistant coach at Page High School. So let's hit another phone call here. I've got, who do I have? Well, no, we'll just go back to comments here. Did they reach for Burks, or was he expected to go when he did? Yeah, I mean, he was pretty much expected to go when he did, but you have to scout him better. I mean, it's no apology for the fact that the asthma was a big deal, that it's injury prone, that it takes him a while to get up to speed. They drafted AJ Brown, and that was a great draft pick. So you have to have a better sense of who exactly you're getting there. And they didn't. It was a bad pick. And that shows you the exact kind of ego that John Robinson had. And that was a death blow to him, that he couldn't square things with A.J. Brown when things were very similar with Deebo Samuel in San Francisco, with Metcalf in Seattle, and with McLaurin in Washington. And all three of those teams sorted things out with all three of those receivers. The only guy that couldn't make things work was John Robinson with A.J. Brown. And for a team that's had a history of terrible receivers, he gave up on that and thought, well, I can just replace him with Burks, and we see how that went. And the answer to that is that it went not very well. So, I mean, that was disappointed. How Ackerman was able to keep his job as long as he did should be studied, says Ethan Jordan. I got a big sneeze coming here. Excuse me. Always well-timed. Titans claim cornerback Darrell Baker from Colts. Adidas is sharing. So there's a corner coming in. We don't know who's going out. They should be required to tell you who's going out with these moves. Rand said you have like an hour, to decide. My understanding was that you had to put your move on the claim. So you say, if we're awarded this guy, we make this move. And that's how it should be. So there is, they do have an open roster spot, though, Sam points out. So thank you for that. And that's a good deal that they're finding a corner, which is a spot they need to be better at very clearly. I was really surprised about Gabe Judy Lawley. He wasn't as good at the end as he was through camp, but he had a pretty good camp. He's got a nice build for the spot. I thought he deserved better. So he's on the practice squad, and I won't be surprised if he surfaces again. But we will see. This video of the Titans cutting guys is really getting some great acclaim, which is interesting to me. Not cutting guys, sorry, telling guys that they made it. So where was that news from on the Colts cornerback? I'm looking for it, not seeing it. Let's get back in here. Let me tell you about Zen Sports. Zen Sports is the best place to bet on the internet. Download the app, and you get in there. You use code TNPaul, and then you make a bet of as little as $10, and you get a free year of paulkuharsky.com, which is a pretty sweet deal. If you're already a member, or for some reason you don't want that beautiful deal, that's fine. You can bet, and you get the same thing. You can bet up to $1,000 on your first wager. No danger first wager. You still get the free year. You bet up to $1,000 on anything plus 500 or less. You either win the bet, or you get a free you get back what you put at risk. So it's a pretty sweet deal. Zen Sports, a really risk-free start to building an account with a local Tennessee-only betting company. A really great spot to go and get an account started. So I urge you to check out Zen Sports. They've been good to me. You can help me by being good to them. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 and over and in Tennessee to bet. Ben Arthur, I'm told, got that scoop. So that's good little news from Ben Arthur. Trying to find that and retweet it quickly. There he is, Benjamin. What else on your mind out there as we continue to delve into this? Did I find it easier to access the coaches and getting more insight this year compared to previous years? Well, the access hasn't been any higher. The coordinators have talked every other week. The assistant coaches still on the same schedule. And now we go into regular season next week where the coordinators will talk every Thursday and the assistant coaches will talk every other week. I certainly think Denard Wilson is more open. I think Shane Bowen felt restricted by Mike Vrabel. I think Nick Holtz is a good conversationalist, informative. The assistant coach is still getting to know a lot of them. You knew a few from last year: Chris Harris, Outen, who's with the tight ends now. I know a few of them from the past. Steve Jackson, who was very helpful to me on the Denard Wilson feature that I did. Tracy Rocker from a past go round, and Frank Bush. They were here with Mike Munchak. So, some of it is standard fare, but they all seem to be good guys. So looking forward to getting to know some of them better. Look forward to that. Do I think that the Titans are going to get work at fullback and with tight end screens? Well, there's no fullback. There's that move position that's a H-back, if you will. That's one of the two tight end positions, the F. And certainly they're going to use tight end screens. We saw a great tight end screen to Nick Vannett. And so that looked good, very effective. And everybody's going to be involved in a screen game that's going to be much more prevalent piece of this offense than it's been in some other versions of the offense. So something to look forward to. It worked super, super well against New Orleans. Now that's against second team defenses, but it could be. John with the interesting question: is this why the Titans are now preaching collaboration and teamwork, diluting power so that no one guy can make or break your organization like JRob did? Well, somebody's got to have final say, and Rand Carthon has final say on personnel. So ultimately, if the draft picks are bad, it's on Carthon, but they will have been more collaborative with that than they were, I think, with John Robinson. It's not like John Robinson was giving Mike Mularkey or Mike Vrabel players that they didn't want ultimately. But yeah, it guards against what you're talking about to a degree. Matt Bailey says, how am I liking this transparency with the new head coach and leadership? New head coach is great. I don't know what gives you the sense that the rest of the leadership is being transparent. Rand is not any more accessible than he was previously. So he said some interesting things at the press conference, but he is not particularly helpful in terms of what's going on with the organization, which is frustrating. So what else do we have here? Cal Baker Jr. has 4.43 speed, says Nick Drake, which is interesting. I hope he plays that fast, and obviously I'm not certain about how the Colts are overall in the defensive backfield, but there's a reason they let him go. So you're not getting premier guys by any means at this stage, but you can get yourself a fifth cornerback who could be good with the right coaches and given the right time. So that'll be it. Sam wants to know, what will the offense hang its hat on? I think it's going to hang its hat on efficiency. So I would expect not to see a lot of negative plays. I would expect to see a high completion rate from Levis, who is going to hit a lot of first looks in the progression when possible. He's going to hit a lot of checkdowns when there's nothing for him there. And they're going to take small gains if they have to. I think Pollard and Spears are going to be able to get 2, 3, 4 yards on a regular basis, which is going to be, helpful for the offense. But that's the first word, Sam, that comes to me is efficiency. And I think, hopefully those big plays that Levis is good at, has a talent for, will come to he and Ridley and he and everybody else to layer on top of that to make them explosively productive. But I think the production underneath that is going to be a key for them, to them, and they'll be able to long drive. You want to throw one over the top once in a while to demoralize people, get big chunks, and all of that. I think some of that stuff's going to take time. And I would think in the first month, Pollard and Spears probably going to be maybe a little bit bigger piece of the offense than we anticipate it being overall in the totality of the season. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And I could say that about a lot of things, unfortunately. It'll be interesting to see how that develops. But that's part of seeing how things go. Back to Vrabel, a couple people, Sam, I know, is saying his offensive philosophy was outdated. And Richard's saying he didn't get a head coach job because no one wanted his ego and his old school ground and pound. I mean, I think the ego thing is certainly a prevalent reason, that kind of strong-willed head coach thing that maybe didn't feel so collaborative, quote unquote, given what unfolded here. I think if you gave him a team that had a good quarterback and good wide receivers, he wouldn't, they talked about the fact that when he got here, what he had was Derrick Henry, and that's what he went with. Then he probably got too married to it because he had good success with it. But I don't know that if he was constructing a team from the ground up, he would choose to have a every down back who is limiting in terms of making the offense predictable and stuff. I also hope, and I don't know that this is the case, that he would hire more smartly if and when he gets a second chance, as particularly in terms of offensive people. But maybe his stubbornness, will let him think that he alone can do it. Yeah, look, some of you come in here and you mentioned Jared Stillman. You're listening to him too much. Like, for his take on personnel, he's still a very young guy. He's not followed this. I know he doesn't understand this team. If he thinks they don't have a tight end, if he thinks that they can't function with the 5 tight ends they have, I just don't get that. I mean, he said David Martin Robinson is better than all of these tight ends, but then David Martin Robinson isn't good enough to play with. And, to him, I guess every good offensive line has 5 all-star players. It doesn't work that way in most places in the league. You need to, if you don't stop listening, you need to listen in a way that you laugh off much of what he says more rather than taking it as some kind of gospel. I've said this time and time again. It's dangerous because you're letting him be influential on things that he should not be influential on. Spencer asks a good question. Would all of the Titans' day 3 rookies make the roster of a top team? Are they promising draft hits, or is our roster depth that bad? Well, I don't know. I can't pretend to know what Kansas City or Philadelphia or some of these better teams look like at these positions. But I would say James Williams would be the last inside linebacker for sure on a lot of teams and be more of a developmental guy who's going to play exclusively special teams and not be on the field at inside linebacker. And I think that's probably what happens to him here. Now, Jalen Harrell's in a more interesting situation because the Titans are thin at outside linebacker and they don't really have anybody to play there. And you don't have anybody to play there, so you need to ask maybe more of a rookie sooner than you would like to, a 7th-round rookie. He played on a very good defense and a very good program that won the national championship next to some very, very good players. And so maybe he surprises you, or maybe, a good preseason prompts you to ask a little bit too much of him. So your question is a good one, and we're going to find out. Are they promising draft hits, or is the roster depth that bad? The roster depth is definitely bad. So there is definitely room for, guys to make this roster. But that doesn't mean that they're not good players. Now we see how they do against, big-time, full-speed, meaningful competition. And if they don't do great, it doesn't mean, it means maybe they ratchet down what they ask of them or the situations that they put them in, but it doesn't mean they're not going to be on the 53 because they don't necessarily have, alternatives for them. And again, I'd say, it's been a pretty remarkable job of a roster revamp given just how bad the Titans roster was from last year. I think 17 guys who were on the active roster for the Jaguars game last year beat up. That's a beat up roster. But 17 guys from that roster are on this 53. And maybe 22 guys from that 53 are on this 53. 52% turnover overall from, I think, last year's opening day roster to this year's opening day roster. Last year it was 48%. So they're churning and churning and churning. And that's a lot of new stuff. So now they've got some age concerns. They've got some injury concerns. Jamal Adams, what are they going to get out of him? They're trying not to count on him too much. And Roger McCreary is a good nickel. He's a good player on this team. You don't want to take him off the field too much. But are they counting on this big nickel package? I think they're counting on a big nickel package in some situations. If Jamal Adams is out, do they have this defensive back to play as a linebacker in that? Well, you would have thought the alternative was Molden. Molden's gone. Who is it? Who is it now? Don't know if they have that. Maybe it's Brownlee. We shall see. So there's a lot to be discovered, which is going to make things, interesting for sure. So I don't know. I'm excited for this countdown to accelerate. Let's hear from. Let's get that off the screen. Sorry about that. Gotta get some production assistance soon, which will speed me up on some of this. Let's hear from Jonathan Merck.
Paul, this is Jonathan Merck, one of your original followers on paulkuharsky.com. I have a question for you. Based on your observations so far, do you predict that Will Levis will be the starting quarterback by week 16? Yes or no? Thanks.
Yes. I think he is the starting quarterback throughout the season. I don't know how good he's going to be or how not good he's going to be, but unless he's hurt, I don't see why he's not going to be the starting quarterback for the team this season. I think he'll probably be a little up and down and a little inconsistent, or maybe a lot inconsistent. But I think that he is a guy who's going to be this team's quarterback through the season. I think that the inconsistencies, the in-game inconsistencies with the accuracy and with the decision-making are being ironed out by a coaching staff who's got the capacity to make things better for him. I wish they had done more of that in camp with, particularly with him and Ridley, but I'm encouraged by the direction things are going. Now, maybe there's a little proximity bias there. I certainly like the guy in terms of the leadership qualities he brings, in terms of quotability. I think he's a fantastic quote. And so not even on a subconscious level, I think it'd be great to cover a team that's got some stability at quarterback and has some command of topics that you need to have command of to be a super effective leader of the team. Here's one from Ed, going a lot off the Titans.
Hey, Paul, this is Ed Henry. I wanted to throw a non-Titan question at you. What do you think of this fiasco that's going down with Deion Sanders and shutting out the Denver Post? And my questions are twofold. One, has that ever happened to you or a colleague of yours in the past, and how did you handle it? And two, what recourse does the paper have or the reporter? And more importantly, is there a rallying around this reporter to come to his defense? Or is the competitive juices flow and other reporters will seize opportunities to get stories now? So I wanted to understand how you guys handled that, or what would you do in that situation? Thanks.
Well, the recourse is that calmer heads prevail, and Deion Sanders' bosses talk to him and get him to behave like an adult and understand that a columnist being critical of him is not something that warrants the university taking away this guy's rights to cover and comment on their football program. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be happening. And that's a problem when somebody like Deion Sanders is the most important and powerful person at a place like the University of Colorado, which just can't happen. What I imagine is happening behind the scenes there is that every person in the press corps that covers Colorado is supporting this guy. They've probably written how objectionable they find it, tweeted about it. I wouldn't want a competitive advantage because my competitor isn't there. And have I ever faced anything like it? JRob, after I wrote Mike Malarkey telling me his side of the being fired story, which was sour grapes, but also true, JRob really caused a major distraction when the first question after the playoff win at Kansas City was about reports that Mularkey was going to be fired. That was in no way healthy for the football team. JRob should have been keeping his mouth shut. The Titans should have been keeping their mouths shut, even if they wanted to fire Mularkey. Let the season, a playoff season, play out and then make your move. There was no reason that should have come up. I talked a few years later with Mularkey in great detail about it. And I think he completely reasonably felt like he was being stabbed in the back in the middle of a good run when they were trying to keep the team focused on playoff games. And JRob was very upset. I wrote that when I did, and was contemplating taking my credential away for the upcoming game. He took the temperature of at least one other person in the press corps, maybe two, who told him it was a terrible idea. And it was a terrible idea, because if they took my credential away that week, I would have written largely about it. It would have been a national story. Some fans would have loved it, but media nationally would have hated it and probably jumped on it. And Robinson, who had a reputation for having a thick skin, would have suffered at being soft under criticism. And by the way, at John Robinson, like every general manager and coach that I've dealt with, covering this team since '96, covering the NFL since '95, get by things and ultimately don't hold grudges. Most of the good ones, quote unquote, good guys, get upset with you, and then after a couple days, they're busy and working, and they get over it, and ultimately things go back to normal. And that's what should have happened with Deion Sanders in Boulder. See what else you have here. Hard not to be accurate, Richard said, in a short pass West Coast type offense. That's true, but it matriculates the ball down the field, if you will, and it can be very effective and very frustrating for a defense who's trying to find a way to get a stop. And Titans will take what they're given. Cody wants to rehash why I left 104.5. I went with Hutton and Withrow to Outkick, which was a mistake on my behalf. Long story short. Anything else? This has been a good conversation. I really like playing those voicemails. It was in the text that you got, if you remember, coming into this podcast. You can leave me a voicemail there anytime. I will take the best ones and I will key these pods around them. So throw them at me. Cody, you can hear me on 102.5 The Game Wednesday mornings with Robbie and Rex Road, and encourage them to have me on along. This is replacing on 440 Network a football show. And it will be later in the day at 4:00 because the Titans' schedule starting next week dictates that they will complete their day, and I will be able to include stuff from coordinators, from Brian Callahan, from players, from practice developments. And so that will get us into a regular season rhythm. And I will also broadcast from the press box after the Bears game and after every game of the season. So stay tuned for plenty more from the Paul Kuharsky podcast, and be sure to be a member of the site, where there will be plenty of unique and insightful posts from me, from Mike Herndon, from Blake Bedingfield. Don't block the box, and be sure to lock your locks. Cheers, everybody. Have a good night.